Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us for our mindfulness seminar. Just giving our presenter a few minutes to set up. So please bear with us. My apologies.
Hello. Good afternoon, I guess it's for you.
Afternoon, Lotte.
I am
Thank you
so
for
incredibly sorry that I'm
that.
late.
That is okay. I know that I have challenges with the time difference as well.
Exactly,
So,
exactly.
so that is fine. So we have some eager participants here who have joined us for a session, and I know that people are also joining in. So it gave some of the late person some time to be on time.
Great,
So I just
wonderful.
wanted, yes, I just wanted to introduce everyone to Dr. Berk. Dr. Berk is a mindfulness specialist. She is from the University of Utrecht in Netherlands, and really appreciative of her taking the time out. I know it's night there, so it's what, about after 8, after
Yeah, it's
9?
8. I thought we were gonna
Okay.
meet at 9, but
Yes.
yeah, it's the
So
evening here.
luckily with technology, I could reach out to you
Yes.
and check in. Are you still coming? So I'm going to keep the introduction very brief. So Dr. Burke is gonna do her presentation, and afterwards I'm gonna include some questions for her based on the survey that was done. And I'll also allow the audience to ask a few questions in the end. So I'm gonna turn it over to Dr. Burke.
Okay, great. Thank you so much for that introduction. And I'm really excited that so many people showed up. So thank you so much for the opportunity to do this. Yeah, I think it's wonderful. Let me see if I can share my screen.
Can you give oh, yes,
Yes.
you've gotten it. Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
Okay, great. And let me see. I'm going to also open up the chat here. So if everyone could maybe perhaps say hi in the chat so that I know that people are tuned in and listening. I understand that people can't turn on their cameras maybe, but it's nice to know that people are here. All right. Hello, everyone. So yeah, before I'm gonna get into what we're gonna work with today, I thought it would be nice to introduce myself a bit. So this is me when I defended my PhD. So I'm from the Netherlands, which is a tiny little country in Europe. So I thought it would be nice to explain like how I actually ended up working in the field of mindful meditation. Um, so I started just as a student doing liberal arts and sciences. I really enjoyed doing neuroscience and psychology, so I ended up doing a research master at the University of Amsterdam. And back then I was actually mostly interested in addiction. So I did addiction research at the University of Amsterdam. And then I also got the opportunity to do research in the United States. So I worked at the University of California, San Diego, um, where I was able to do my master thesis. And then I stayed there for another 3 or 4 years doing addiction research, mostly with adolescents. Um, at the same time, I started reading some things about meditation, and it's something that I don't really know why, but it's always something that I thought was fascinating. And I think I read, I think just like something in a magazine about how meditation can change your brain. And I was like, oh, wow, that seems really exciting, particularly because they promise that you can, train your attention and that overall you would just be less scatterbrained, which I thought would be great for me. I mean, obviously, I guess I just showed with me missing the correct time already a great example of how sometimes I'm not necessarily the most organized person, and I'm definitely the kind of person who gets distracted easily. So it's something that I was really interested in. And in San Diego at the university, at the medical center, they actually have a center for mindfulness. So it was really wonderful. I was able to contact them, and they provided 8-week programs. I'll tell you a little bit more about what exactly that entails later. So I followed a mindfulness program myself, and that was a really amazing experience. Not because it was my first experience with meditation, because actually a couple of years before that, I did a 10-day retreat. That was basically like my first meditation experience, where I was just like, you know what, let's see what it is. Let's just do a 10-day retreat. And it's Vipassana, which is a kind of meditation tradition where you go there and all you do is meditate. You're not allowed to read or write or speak or basically do anything except for meditation, which was a really wonderful experience because I immediately experienced the benefits of meditation, because after those 10 days, I felt a lot calmer, less stressed. I felt like I could focus a lot better. But obviously, going back to work and going back to your day-to-day life, I really wasn't able to keep up with practicing. So then about a year later or so, I was in the States and I got to do an 8-week program. That was really wonderful because this program really is something that you do in your day-to-day life. So you already throughout the program learn how to incorporate these techniques that you're learning into your day-to-day life. Because I think, if you just go and lock yourself away and meditate, it's kind of, I guess, easy in a way to do because there are no distractions. Whereas in your day-to-day life, there's distractions all the time. So yeah, that was I'd say maybe more than about 10 years ago, a bit longer actually. And I got the opportunity to do a PhD in the Netherlands. So I went back to the Netherlands and I focused my research on mindfulness and aging. So I worked at an Alzheimer's center. So I basically switched my topics from addiction to mindfulness and aging. And we really looked at whether it was possible to use this kind of like attention program to help people with beginning stages of dementia, but more importantly, also their partners, because as you can imagine, it can be really difficult to also support a person through the stages of dementia. So I already see in the chat, I want to do Vipassana retreat. I will actually, I think I'll type it in here. There are worldwide Vipassana retreats. The nice thing is that it's free, or basically you're asked to donate whatever you're allowed at the end of the program. So, if at the moment you don't have a lot of money, you can maybe cover only the cost for the food or just nothing. And if you have more to spend, you can donate more. I actually looked it up whether they had one in Jamaica, but unfortunately, I think they don't. So perhaps if you're traveling somewhere, I mean, when it's possible again, post-corona, it's something you could look into. But yes, before I start rambling even longer, let's get down to business and start talking about what mindfulness actually is, because I've now used the word many times. But I think it's good to, explain what it is. Then I'll do some mindfulness exercises with you. And then, of course, at the very end, you can also ask questions. And I think Carol also has some questions prepared for me. So I'm actually very curious to hear from you what you think mindfulness is. So if you would be so kind to put it in the chat, I think that would be easiest. And yeah, what is something that you think about that mindfulness can do, or what it is? Great, wonderful. Already seeing some good answers. Yeah, being in the present, awareness. All right, I'm wondering if people are Googling. So yeah, these are great answers. What I was thinking, and maybe some of you have actually thought this as well, and I think in the survey that you filled out, I noticed a few answers that people said like, oh, okay, maybe like I'd like to empty my mind, or I want to relax. You know, mindfulness can really help you to relax. Now, these are actually a list of things that I'd like to quickly go over because these are basically myths. So I think anyone would love to, you know, empty their minds. The thing is, with mindful meditation, you try to be more aware of, for example, your thoughts. Um, so it's not like you can get rid of your thoughts, but you can learn how to relate differently to your thoughts. So instead of trying to get rid of them, you change your relation to them. Then relaxation, it's definitely a welcoming side effect. And for a lot of people who practice mindfulness meditation, they will notice that they will have less stress and they feel more relaxed, sometimes immediately during an exercise. But this is basically a side effect. It's not the goal. Sometimes it can actually mean that you become more aware of how much stress you have, or maybe aware of pain in your body that you weren't aware of before. So, you know, it's not the same. Mindfulness isn't relaxation, although relaxation is often a side effect. Some people also think that mindfulness is a religion. When it was developed in the late 70s, it definitely had its roots in Buddhism, but it is then created as a secular program. So it's not a religion. So you can practice mindfulness meditation next to your own religion. I think some people also hope that you will achieve a state of bliss with mindfulness meditation. And again, unfortunately, it's just more about practicing your awareness and paying attention to what is happening at that moment. So also you will become aware of unpleasant things. So it's not all just focusing on pleasant things and ignoring the unpleasant things. An interesting thing that sometimes people will ask me, you know, like, well, if I go practice mindfulness, you know, am I not become like super soft and you know, become weak and lose my passion or my drive? And actually, you know, mindfulness meditation might actually help you with, for example, productivity, but also to see things more clearly, and also be able to choose how you respond to something instead of having an automatic reaction. So let's say someone says something to you that really makes you upset. You might already become aware, for example, by your bodily sensations, that you start to become mad yourself. But if you practice mindfulness meditation, you have this awareness, and then you create basically this space to make a decision. Maybe it is the right moment to also react in an angry way, for example, or perhaps maybe this is not a good moment, and you're able to not react automatically in you know, in anger, and can actually choose a different reaction. And then finally, I think, you know, the word mindfulness, for a lot of people, it feels like it's something new agey or really vague. The nice thing, though, is that the mindfulness training is very practical, and you'll see that today as well. I'll show you a breathing meditation. But also, if you do a full program, it's full of just like practical exercises that you can apply in your day-to-day life. So it's really not something that's really vague and new agey. It's something that you could just apply in your day-to-day life. Let me see. Okay, so I guess these were myths. So just to clarify that. But then, of course, you know, what is it? Well, I've seen some great answers already in the chat. So it is really, a focus on non-judgmental awareness and really knowing what's going on, what kind of feelings, sensations, and thoughts you're having in the present moment. And I think most people can relate to, your body is of course always in the present, but your mind starts wondering about things that have happened in the past, or maybe things that you still have to do in the future. So it always seems like your mind is somewhere else instead of in the present moment, and that is something that you can practice and work on through mindful meditation. Indeed, it's kind of like a psychological time travel. um yeah, you might say like, okay, well, what is wrong with thinking about the past or the future? Well, in general, for a lot of people who are never really present with what they're doing at that moment, it creates kind of a feeling of dissatisfaction. Also, people tend to experience a lot more stress when they're not in the present moment. So that's why it can be really helpful to practice this. Now, of course, keeping an eye on the time, I'll promise I'll stop talking soon and we'll do an exercise. Just wanted to shed some light on research that has been done. There's this nice review paper on the neuroscience of mindfulness meditation. And I think this really nicely connects with what you indicated on your survey, like what it was that you'd like to get out of, for example, mindfulness meditation. A lot of people wrote something about, dealing with difficult emotions, but also having better control, being able to focus better. So these are all different components that belong to mindfulness. And basically, these are the different components that these are skills basically that you practice and enhance, where, these authors kind of concluded that it all has to do with self-regulation. The nice thing is that there's been a lot of research already on different brain areas being involved. And basically all these areas are involved with self-regulation. And there's quite some indication that practicing meditation can increase your self-regulation. All right, so before we do an exercise, I just wanted to mention a bit more what, when people talk about mindfulness, what usually they talk about is a program that's called mindfulness-based stress reduction, or MBSR. So this was a program that was developed in the late 70s by John Kabat-Zinn in the United States. He was a doctor at a hospital, and he noticed that for a lot of patients who I think someone might need to turn off their microphone. I'm not sure if you're hearing this as well. Let me see. Yeah, okay, all right. So what he noticed with a lot of patients that were basically, there is no treatment available anymore. So for example, someone with chronic pain where they've done a lot of checkups and they can't, for example, really find a solution, or they can't find treatment. And basically what they will tell these patients is like, yeah, we've done all the treatment that we have, so just learn to live with it. Well, they didn't tell the people how you live with it. So for example, if you have chronic pain, that can really affect, your quality of life. So the doctor himself had some experience with meditation, and he thought, you know what, I think this could really help my patients. So he created an 8-week program. So it's an 8-week program where a group of people come together for 2.5 hours, guided by a mindfulness trainer. And basically what they'll learn is some meditation exercises, but it also involves mindful movement. So perhaps some of you are familiar with yoga, movement that you really also connect your breath to, and it really is about bodily awareness. Informal practice means, not necessarily sitting down and meditating, but just paying attention to what you're doing at the moment. So that can mean, for example, eating the first bite of your meal slower and with full attention, so that you first smell your food, look at the food, really, like have it in your mouth for a little longer than you would normally, so that you do it with full awareness. So these kind of smaller exercises to help get you back to the present moment in your day-to-day life. And there's also a component of psychoeducation. So what that means is there will be some topics, for example, about stress explained, how chronic stress can be really detrimental to your health, and what are some mechanisms, and how how these exercises could help with reducing stress. Yeah, so it's finally time to get to work and to do a little exercise. So what I would like to do first is explain what we're gonna do. So basically what we're gonna do is mindfulness of breath. So it's a breathing meditation. So what that means is we're all gonna just, sit here. We'll try to focus on the sensation of breathing. So you're just noticing the sensation of breathing. And obviously in a minute, I'll give you some more detailed instructions. But what you will notice is that your mind will start to wander. So here you are sitting, focusing on your breathing, and then all of a sudden you're like, what am I going to cook tonight? Or, I said something really inconvenient this morning, or what shall I do this weekend? All these kind of thoughts will just pop into your mind. But the great thing is that as soon as you notice that your mind has wandered, you have the opportunity to bring your attention back to the sensation of breathing. So this is basically all that you're doing. I mean, it's simple, not easy. But whenever your mind is wandering, don't feel like, oh, I'm not doing it right. This is what you're supposed to be doing. You're trying to keep your attention to the sensations of your breathing. Your mind will start to wander. As soon as you notice this, you bring your attention back to the breathing. And this is basically this continuous process that will keep on happening. And before we get started, I just wanted to have you pay attention to two basically foundations of doing these kind of exercises. One is embodying intention. So that means take a moment to like sit up straight, really feel like, okay, this is it, I'm gonna train my brain, I'm gonna do an exercise. So sit up straight, kind of like a dignified posture, both feet on the floor. And a really important one, which I think can be quite difficult for a lot of people, self-kindness. So that's something that you might notice. Maybe when your mind is wandering, you will curse yourself and be like, I'm not doing it right, or why can't I pay attention? But be kind to yourself and realize, you're trying to learn something new. It's really not easy to do. So try to treat yourself as if you would treat your best friend, and be kind to yourself. Okay, so time to train our brain. So just take a moment to sit up straight, your feet flat on the floor, and preferably with your back also not touching the chair, so that you can have your back nice and straight. So kind of like a relatively active posture. Your hands can just rest on your lap or wherever is comfortable for you. And if you'd like to, you can either close your eyes, or you could just let your gaze rest in front of you, whatever is comfortable for you at this moment. So just take a moment to get settled in a comfortable yet alert posture. Just noticing how you're sitting at this moment, your feet touching the floor, your hands resting on your lap or on the chair, whatever's comfortable. Your back is straight and upright without being stiff. Your shoulders relaxed, facial muscles relaxed. Maybe tucking in your chin just a little bit. And just taking a moment, aware of your posture. Maybe noticing exactly where your feet touch the floor, which part of your feet actually make contact with the floor. Maybe aware of where your body makes contact with the chair. and aware of your body as a whole sitting here. And then whenever you're ready, you're going to bring your attention to the sensation of breath. So that could, for example, be right at the nostrils. So noticing where the flow of air is passing your nostrils, maybe noticing that slightly cooler air is coming in and slightly warmer air is passing out through the nostrils. Or you could choose to follow the sensation of your breathing in the rising and falling of your chest, your rib cage, rising when it fills up with air and falling when you're breathing out. Or you can move your attention to your belly. And again, just noticing the sensation of the rising and falling of your belly with each in and out breath. So no matter where, doesn't really matter where you pay attention to, but just pick one that feels best for you at this moment and just follow the sensations of each in and each out breath. No need to change the way that you're breathing, just following your natural breath. And perhaps if for some reason you have a cold and you have difficulty breathing through your nose, you can also just pay attention to the sensation of your feet instead of the sensations of your breath. So just noticing the sensations of each in breath and each out breath, being curious what you can discover now that you give your attention to the sensations of breathing. And where is your attention now? Every time that your attention is wandered, as soon as you notice this is a great opportunity to just bring your attention back to the sensation of breathing. And no matter how many times your mind wanders, every time it happens, you can just bring your attention back to the sensations of your breath. And where's your attention now? Always a opportunity as soon as you notice to just bring your attention back to your breathing. And then whenever you're ready, you can slowly expand your attention to also encompass your entire body as it's sitting here, breathing, maybe noticing the movements of the body with each breath, aware of your posture, aware of the space that you're sitting in. And whenever you're ready, you can go ahead and close off this exercise by opening your eyes if you had them closed. Maybe if you'd like to, stretch out or do some shoulder rolls, whatever you feel is comfortable at this moment. So, of course, I'm very curious to hear from you what the experience was like. Maybe some of you have done some meditation before, maybe for some of you it was the first time. So, if you'd like to, you can mention something in the chat. Was it easy to do, or did you have difficulties? Yeah, falling asleep. That's something very common. Yeah. Yeah, and awareness. That's great. So sometimes, when particularly if you have, for example, a busy day and then you take a moment to kind of stand still and become aware, and all of a sudden you maybe realize like, oh, I actually am like this with my shoulders or have tension in my jaw. Um, Lots of distraction. Yeah, for some people, when you try to focus on your breath, there's all these thoughts that come in, things that you still have to do, or things that you did earlier that day. Um, yeah, and particularly sleep. That's often, I think, the biggest challenge when meditating, particularly because, of course, most people who do these kind of programs tend to be people who also experience a lot of stress, and I think they often don't sleep that well. So then once they, sit to do this exercise, all of a sudden they notice how tired they are. So maybe you've been working really hard all day and then you sit still and you try to meditate and you realize like, oh, I'm almost falling asleep. Now, the great thing is that all these things that you noticed can inform you on what to do next. So perhaps, you realize like, oh, I carry a lot of tension in my shoulders. Maybe that means it's a good idea to do a little bit of stretching. Maybe you almost fell asleep. Well, that could be an indication to maybe go to bed early tonight. So all these things give you information on what you could possibly do next. Um, and yeah, the interesting thing is also in terms of, distraction, you might start noticing a difference. So, let's say you do this every day, you might notice that some days there are so many thoughts in your head and everything feels very chaotic, whereas other days maybe there are less thoughts. Also, some days it might be 5 minutes before you actually notice that you're thinking about something else, and then be like, oh, oops, I was supposed to pay attention to my breath, and then bring your attention back. The idea is that, you know, it's a skill. So just like if you go to the gym to lift weights to get bigger muscles, you do these kind of practice to practice the skill of noticing when you are distracted. So over time, you might notice that maybe not necessarily that you get distracted less, I mean, possibly, but also that you become more aware of it. So, you know, perhaps at the beginning it's 10 minutes in and you've made shopping lists and other to-do lists, or you started daydreaming before you actually were aware that you were not paying attention to the breath anymore. So those kind of moments become shorter. So already when you start drifting off, you realize and you can like refocus your attention. So that's a nice thing, you know, it's really a skill that you can keep practicing. So yeah, oh, it's great to hear someone wrote that, you know, became aware of it, bring back the attention. And that's great because that's all there is to it. You know, your mind will wander 1,000 times. You just have to bring it back 1,000 times. All right. So I thought it would be nice to do one more little activity that is kind of more of a practical thing that is done in the MBSR training. And it is to help you get some insight into what you get energy from in your day-to-day life. So what it will ask you to do is if you have, I mean, you can write it down on your laptop somewhere in a file, or grab a piece of paper and a pen and just kind of go over your day-to-day life. You know, what do you do in the morning? Do you know, kind of basic, you know, get up, shower, eat breakfast. I'm not sure if you're commuting or probably staying at home still. Um, you know, kind of like walk in your mind through a day and write down all the activities that you do in a day. So, um, so what you'll do is you'll list your daily activities. So that's what you'll do first. Then after that, you're going to label them. So you'll label them with N, nourishing, so meaning this activity gives you energy, or label it D, this depletes your energy levels, or you can work with like a plus or a minus sign, and just kind of like look at your average day, uh, make these labels, and then kind of evaluate and see, okay, well, what's the balance like? What do your days look like? Do you have a lot of activities that give you energy, or maybe only activities that take away energy? So after you've made the list, evaluate it, and what I would like you to do as a last step is to kind of take a moment and think, okay, what could you possibly do to perhaps spend some more times on activities that are nourishing? And what I would like you to do in this is to be specific and realistic. So that means maybe you really enjoyed the breathing meditation and you're like, you know what, I think that'll be good for me. So your goal is to meditate more. But instead of have as a goal, meditate more, be specific and say, okay, every morning when I wake up, I spend 5 minutes doing a breathing meditation. And realistic means that, okay, when you say, okay, I want to meditate more, then say like, okay, every morning I'm going to do an hour of meditation, and at night also an hour. I mean, it's a nice goal, but it's probably unrealistic, and it's not something that you'll be able to do, which will then, you know, discourages you. So go ahead and take a moment. I'm going to give you 10 minutes to do this. So again, you know, kind of walk through your average day in your mind, list down your activities, and label them with whether it gives you energy or takes energy away. Evaluate what your day looks like, and think if this is optional, if you'd like to see like, okay, is there something that I could do to maybe add activities that are nourishing? And if you have any questions, feel free to ask in the chat. And yeah, I think you'll be able to do this in 10 minutes. And if you made the list and made the labels, maybe even thought of something that you could potentially do. Another thing that you could also do if you are done with these steps is to think back in the past, what were some of the activities that did give you energy? Because perhaps, at the moment, they're not really in your day-to-day life, but I'm sure that you know which activities would give you energy and kind of see maybe you can, make a little list or write a few of them down so that you have a bit of an overview, perhaps, that you could use in the future as well. And I'll just give you a couple more minutes. I think most people will probably be almost done.
Dr. Berk, there's a question in the chat. What if the activity
Oh,
neither nourishes or depletes?
great question. I missed that. Yeah, you could do, for example, a plus minus sign. So it's kind of a neutral activity. Yeah, I mean, there's probably quite a few neutral activities, so that's absolutely fine. The idea is that you kind of get an overview and can kind of make a tally more or less to see what the balance is. Do you have mostly nourishing or do you have mostly depleting activities? All right, so I followed along with the exercise. I'm done. I think I'm going to assume that most people have been able to do this. And if not, you can always, of course, come back to this later and work on it some more later. So you might wonder, like, okay, well, how does this really help me? Well, the question is really, like the idea is okay, like you have a certain amount of energy in a day, you do all these activities, some will give you more energy and some will take away energy. So, what are some things that you can do? Well, obviously, simple solution seems to be like, well, just do more things that give you energy. Well, that's not always possible. So, sometimes it can also make a change on how you relate to the activities that you have to do. Um, for example, if I have to one activity that really depletes a lot of my energy, I also really dislike doing is doing taxes where you have to like fill out forms and I don't know. I don't know. I have a lot of resistance to do this task, but instead of really staying with that, sometimes it can help to be like, okay, how can I relate to this activity in a different way? Sometimes, you have to do some activities that are not that pleasant, but afterwards, that you might feel a sense of accomplishment after doing that. What can also help is to really be really mindful what you're doing. So another thing, let me think. Oh yeah, I don't particularly like doing dishes. uh, but if I do that activity, if I see it as kind of like a mindfulness exercise, meaning that I'm fully present with what I'm doing, I'm aware of the warm water on my hands. I'm aware of like the color on like the soap bubbles, like the kind of colors that you see, really focus on kind of like the physical sensation, what kind of smell the soap has, those kind of things. It's basically like a activity to practice your awareness and attention. So anytime I start to wander, I bring my attention back to what I'm doing. And this minding the gap, what that means is, we have a situation how we want it to be and the situation how it actually is. And there's a gap between that. And that's pretty much very often the case. And that is something that you can just be aware of, like, oh, okay, there's a lot of kind of like suffering or dissatisfaction because I have an idea of how it should be and what reality is. So kind of being aware of that and, being aware like, okay, well, I have to do the dishes when I want to do it or not. I mean, this is a very simple, silly example. But, there's some things in life that you can't change. So then you can see if you can try how you relate to this, because if it's not something that you can change, you can see if, there's maybe some sort of acceptance or how you relate to this activity or event. And then as a last point, that's something that I mentioned at the end. It's if you had time left over, something that you could do. I definitely recommend that maybe some other time you spend some time on making a list of things that can really help you give you some energy. And it's really nice to have that list at hand, because usually when your energy is really low, or if your mood is low, you don't really feel like doing anything. And it can also be harder to think of what you could do, because, that's just not really your mind space. Then just looking at a list and picking one of the activities can really kind of like help lower the threshold to actually, go for a walk outside, or play music, or, do something that, will give you some energy. Um, Great. I'm glad to hear I'm not the only one disliking washing dishes. um, all right. Yeah, let me just see what I have as the next slides. Okay. I think we have some time, because what I'd like to do is a last short little exercise. We'll do one more meditation exercise, just because this one is a bit more specific. And this is actually the exercise that people who follow mindfulness training tend to do the most afterwards, because it's a shorter one. When you do a training program, you might be asked to do like a 45-minute meditation. Well, obviously that's a little harder to plan in your day-to-day life. But this 3-step breathing space is something that you could do at any moment. You don't even have to like sit down or lay down. You can do it when you're standing in line at the grocery store. But preferably this is something that you could do, for example, if you have a short break. And what you'll do is it's basically a short meditation. There's a hourglass here, because you basically start off with a broad awareness. So kind of like, what is my experience in this moment? So kind of like your thought, bodily sensations and feelings. Then you narrow your focus and you focus on, well, usually it's the breath. So you focus on the sensations of breathing, and then you kind of like open your awareness and attention again, of bodily sensations, and kind of like what is there at that moment. So I like to just guide you through this short meditation, so that it's something that you could do in your day-to-day life. So again, if you'd like to join me, just take a moment to come into a comfortable seated position, your feet flat on the floor, your hands just resting on your lap or wherever's comfortable. Sitting up straight. Your eyes closed if you'd like to, or you can just rest your gaze somewhere in front of you. Aware of your body sitting here, noticing your feet touching the floor, your body touching the chair, noticing where exactly your body's touching the chair. Maybe noticing the warmth of your hands on your lap if you have them placed there. Just sitting up nice and straight. And basically just checking in with yourself, almost as if, you're checking in your personal weather report. So first, looking at your bodily sensations, what do you notice? Maybe kind of doing a quick scan from your feet through your legs all the way up to your head. Is there anything that you notice? And then also aware of any thoughts, maybe feelings. Just checking in with yourself. What's here at this moment? And no need to change anything. Just aware what's here at this moment. And then whenever you're ready, bringing your attention to your breath. So just choosing a point where you'd like to focus on. So perhaps nostrils or the rib cage, your chest or belly. And then just bringing your awareness to the sensations of breathing. And when your mind wanders, it's an opportunity to bring your attention back to the breath. And then slowly expanding the attention to encompass your body. So becoming aware of your posture, aware of the space that you're sitting in, maybe even noticing the sounds in your surroundings. And then eventually, whenever you're ready, opening your eyes if they were closed, and making some movements, whatever feels comfortable for you. Maybe stretching or moving your shoulders a bit. So these were basically 3 steps that you can always do. So really, you start off with, what's my experience in this moment? So bodily sensations, thoughts, feelings, just checking in with yourself and seeing what's here at this moment. Then you narrow your focus on your breath, and then again you open it. And you could even consider a 4th step, and that would basically be like a next action. So considering what you've noticed, this is something that I mentioned before. Let's say, so you barely fell asleep, like were able to stay awake. Maybe it's like, okay, maybe I should cancel an appointment tonight so I can go to bed early. Or what is there in my coming week that I could shift to give myself some more space to rest? Or um, I've even had it where all of a sudden I realized I was really thirsty and I realized like, oh, I hadn't had any water all day. Just because when you're just kind of like busy and you're on an automatic pilot, you tend to just kind of like keep going without really checking in with yourself and noticing this. Um, Let me see. All right. So I guess you're kind of like want to close off. So there's a few things. One quote that I really like that I think really describes what mindful meditation can do for you is you can't stop the waves, but you can learn to surf. The idea is really, again, there are a lot of things that happen in your life that you have no control over. So the idea is that how can you relate to these events that are going on in your life, and how can you deal with those things that you can't change? And I think this whole idea of becoming more aware, becoming more present, gives you the space to react to your surroundings with awareness instead of having these automatic reactions where you feel like there was no actual choice there. And there's several things that you can do. So if you're interested in kind of, exploring this further, there's some small exercises that you could do. So for example, this 3-step breathing space, I would recommend just try to do that, particularly if you're shifting activities. It can be really helpful. Let's say you're in one online meeting and you have to go to another online meeting. Maybe in between, you just, it can be as short as 30 seconds where you just kind of like check in with yourself, focus on your breath, and then continue. Um, There are also daily activities that you could do with more awareness. So for example, drinking your cup of coffee or tea without, being on your phone, but really kind of like being aware of the sensations, the smell, what it feels like, what it tastes like. The same with the meals. You could maybe do the first bite of your meal, really focusing on, all the sensations, smell, what does it taste like, without doing other things. Even, for example, brushing your teeth. So that's a nice activity that people do every day. And see if maybe this time when you go brush your teeth tonight, instead of, thinking about all the things that you have to do tomorrow or thinking about the day or just kind of like daydreaming, see if you can be fully aware and notice the movement that you make, notice what the foam feels like, what the smells are like, and really kind of bring your attention back to what you're doing at that moment. Some other resources, so there are apps that you could use. Headspace is a really well-known one, and I think it's really good. Unfortunately, it's not free, but they have a 10-day free program, so you could start out with that. There's also Insight Timer. It's basically a collection of all kinds of audio material that you could use. If you're interested in actually following a program, there are several options. So you could go and find a trainer, but if they're not available, you could do it yourself with the guidance of a book. So this book, Mindfulness, A Practical Guide to Finding Peace in a Frantic World, basically guides you through the 8 weeks. So this guided audio link is the link that belongs to this book. So that can be really helpful to use. There's actually also a full online program. So I think this was, if I'm correct, this was created by someone in the US who realized that there are a lot of people in remote areas that don't have access to go to like a group training, or just for other reasons aren't able to. And he was like, okay, well, I'll just put all the material for free online and you can follow it yourself. Now, I must say there's really an added benefit to doing a group practice, because you can share the experiences, you can see how you're all struggling with like managing to do that, and it can feel like a nice supportive environment. So perhaps what you could do with a group of friends to use these kind of sources and get together to practice, that can be really helpful. But even if you just go to one of these links, so this is, for example, the link from UCSD where I did my training. There's all kinds of free materials available with guided meditation. You can also just see like, okay, well, I'm just gonna put on a meditation whenever I feel like it, or preferably more structurally, like whenever you wake up, whenever before going to bed or something like that, and just kind of try it out. I really think, like even if you do something, even if all you take away from this is that whenever you have your coffee or tea, you try to pay attention to what you're doing at that moment and give yourself, that 5 or 10 minute break. I think that's already something that can really help. The more kind of what we call formal practice of, doing a meditation, that of course really builds on the skill of paying attention and relating to your thoughts and experiences differently. All right, so this was kind of like a short introduction on what mindfulness meditation is. Obviously, I could talk about this for many more hours, but I hope that it gave you somewhat of an introduction of what it is. And Carol has some more questions for me, so hopefully that will clarify some things as well. But I already wanted to let you know that if you have any questions, feel free to just send me an email and I'll try to answer them.
Thank you, Dr. Berk. This was an excellent presentation. What I appreciate is the way in which you've organized the seminar, just in terms of putting in context and explaining what it is that we will be doing, so there is an understanding, and then adding the experiential component where we're actually able to engage in the exercises. I know for me, when I practice mindfulness, especially when it comes to meditating, initially when I was introduced to it, I became very distracted and it was difficult to focus and come back to the present moment. And I'd be in the room and observing others, and I'm like, what is this? Um, but I think over time of practicing, as you'd mentioned, over time of practicing, it becomes easier to shut out the distraction and be able to be in the present moment. I find that also being online, there are times when I'll take a break from classes or break from seeing patients. And once I get that cup of tea, I practice mindfulness in terms of what it feels like. And that
Great.
gives me more energy. Yeah. So these tools that you've introduced us to, I think they can really be beneficial if persons are open to it. And I just want to thank you for giving us the time and sharing with us. So I have some questions here from the survey. Some have been covered in the presentation. Some are pretty new. So persons are asking, how do I learn to say no?
Yeah, that's a difficult one. Well, I think it's something that I would say in terms of like mindful meditation, the idea is that first of all, you have to become aware of when this happens. So one first step that can help is to create some more space for yourself. So whenever someone asks you, oh, could you do this or that, instead of, immediately saying yes or trying to say no, maybe the first thing that you could do is say, I'm going to have to think about it. I'll let you know tomorrow, or I'll let you know in 10 minutes or 5 minutes. Sometimes if it is a small thing, you could say like, okay, let me get back to you in 5 minutes. So that way you kind of like create a little space for you to think what you want to do. And I think then it would be a great opportunity to do a three-step breathing space, because it allows you to really kind of take a step back, be aware of yourself, and notice like, oh, actually, like I feel exhausted, like I should not be taking on more tasks. Or maybe you notice like, well, you know what, I start to feel really excited just thinking about this project or activity that they're asking me to do. Maybe I can do this. So or also just practical things of looking at your planner and seeing when you would have time to do this. I think a really practical thing, if it's, for example, your employer, you could say like, I can do this, but then I would have to not do another task, make sure that you kind of negotiate that. So I would say in terms of, mindful meditation, on the one hand, do something practical, like giving yourself more space so that you have some more time to decide, and, using a little meditation so that you can really feel and notice with yourself, how am I doing at this moment? Is this a good moment to add on more tasks or to say yes? Or maybe this is a good opportunity to just practice saying no.
Yes, I appreciate that response because awareness can bring so much information. So starting out with awareness, but giving yourself that space. I like that one because oftentimes, we become so reactive in a situation. We're not even thinking that we do have the opportunity, or we can choose to take that space to make a more informed decision. So
Mm-hmm.
nothing is like really rushing as the mind is, putting pressure and anxiety on us. Like we can step back and then make a decision that we're more at peace with. So thank you for that response.
Yeah, thank you
Another
for the
question
question.
that,
It's a great question.
yeah, it is. Another one is how do I learn to be in control?
Um, yeah, I think practice mindful meditation. um, it's difficult. I mean, it's also very broad, so I'm sure that there's something more specific going on that you feel like you're struggling with, that you feel like you might not have control with. But again, I would say that we come back to awareness, really becoming aware to when you feel like your control is slipping. Let me see if I can think of an example. Let's say you want to eat less candy, and you notice that whenever you feel tired, you go and grab a candy bar or something, because maybe, like you want some sugar to feel like a little energy. But it's become something that's kind of like automatic, because you don't really think about it. It's not really a conscious decision, but it's just something that you do. Um, well, then the first step would be to create awareness and be like, oh, wait, I always do this when I'm tired, or I always do this, when I walk from one building to the next, I walk past the kitchen, or, at these times, it's when I do it. So that's the first step, right? Like awareness. And then you could see like, okay, what are some changes that I could possibly make to prevent that from happening? So sometimes it's removing well, in this simple example is to maybe not have the candy on your desk or in the kitchen, for example, or noticing like, okay, well, I'm aware that I'm doing this when I'm tired. So maybe instead I'll go for a walk, because being outside, being in the fresh air, that will actually give me more energy, because I've spent my whole day behind the laptop staring at a screen. Actually, what I need to do is just to move, or even something silly like doing 10 jumping jacks to get the blood flowing, that is actually what I need or want to do, just so kind of like create an alternative option. But of course, I say like awareness is the first step. And I think if you were to practice some meditation, you would be able to make that gap bigger, where you realize like, okay, for example, I have this craving, or I'm feeling like I'm losing control over something, and then create some space where you can make a different decision than, an automatic reaction where you do something that perhaps you don't want to. So, it's a bit broad, so I'm not sure if this makes
Yeah,
sense, but hopefully this answers the question somewhat.
it does, and certainly highlighting when we're on autopilot, we're not really navigating, even though there are things outside or even internally that would affect our way of functioning. And then the last question is learning to manage my inner demons and negative thoughts. How do I
Oy.
learn how to manage my inner demons and negative thoughts?
Yeah, that is a really difficult one. I think again, the first step would be to try to practice awareness and seeing. Okay, so there is a meditation exercise that could possibly help you with this. So what we've practiced today is where you focus on breathing. So your breath is basically the anchor. Now, there are also other things that you can focus on. So you could also do sound meditation. So where you're paying attention to the sounds around you. There's also one where you pay attention to your thoughts. And that's a really difficult one, because often as soon as you try to focus on your thoughts, like poof, they're all kind of like gone. Or, they're just everywhere, or you kind of like get distracted. And kind of the idea is, for some people, it can help to try to visualize it and see your thoughts as they come up as really just kind of like mental events that happen. And perhaps it can help to visualize that they're like clouds in the sky just moving by, or boats on water floating by. The idea is, some thoughts are really small, so it's a tiny cloud that just kind of like floats by. Some are really big and kind of like linger. Some travel fast, some travel slow, some just kind of like keep on reappearing. But the idea is that you try to basically distance yourself a bit from the thoughts. So you're not trying to change them or do anything with them, but you really try to just kind of like be aware of them. And sometimes it can even help to label it. So say like, okay, that's a thought about planning, or that's a thought, that's negative self-talk, or this is, uh, a thought about anxiety or something like that. So you kind of try to label them. And yeah, it's a bit difficult for me to explain all this without also, for example, doing the exercise, which is usually something that you do after you've done a bit more practice with paying attention to your breath so that you have a bit of that experience, and then you try to do this with your thoughts. The idea is that you kind of like create that distance between you and the thoughts, so that you also start realizing that thoughts aren't facts. That's one kind of like topic also in the mindfulness training, that you realize like these are just mental events that happen, that kind of like, you know, pop up, and without trying to get engaged with it, you just kind of like notice and let them go by. And that is difficult, and that just requires a lot of practice. But sometimes that realization that thoughts aren't facts can really help. So yeah, I think that's all I can say about that now.
Yeah. I think that that is a good response, because oftentimes people get caught up in the thoughts, and they think of it as the reality of the situation and feed into what they believe is the reality. So creating that separation, just labeling it and observing the thoughts as opposed to being reactive to the thoughts, is a good method of separation once more.
Yeah.
So there are three things that I've learned so far from your presentation. There's a autopilot, being aware, and creating space. I am going to open the floor if anyone has any questions.
And
Anything
also
that any.
perhaps I'm not sure what the possibilities are of sharing it, but the my slide with all the resources, perhaps I can
Oh, that
send it
would
to
be
you and you
great.
would be able to
Yes,
share it. I'm not sure
yes.
how you would do that, but
Thanks. Yeah, we have a website, faculty website, so I can upload it on the website. So thank you for that. All right. So I'm checking to see, do we have any questions? Anything that you guys would like help with? Something that Dr. Burke could assist with? I'm seeing some positive reviews here, Dr. Burke,
yeah, I'm reading the chats
about your
now.
session.
That's great. I read that someone actually gave themselves some space by just telling the person that they'd sleep on it and get back to them,
Yeah,
in
yeah,
terms of saying no and learning how to give yourself some space.
yeah. Okay, okay. All right. Okay, so I'll upload the information on our website, or find additional ways of sending it to you. Um, so since we don't have any questions for Dr. Burke, I would just like to thank her once more for taking the time out to teach us about these different exercises. I thoroughly enjoyed the exercise, and I can see that, you know, other persons did. And I would also like to thank our participants for showing up and engaging and making it become interactive by participating in the chat. So thanks, everyone.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Okay.
I'm glad to hear that people found it helpful.
Mhm.
So yeah, the resources will be shared, and if you have any questions, you can always email me.
Someone is asking for your email. So I'm gonna put this information online so you can access it. So you go to our FSS website. We'll just create some information there for you guys.
Yeah, and I'll put my email already in the chat in case someone wants to.
Yeah. for okay, I'm assuming that they're asking for the information when we put up the survey. I'm assuming that that's what that comment was on. For oh,
Is this a question for me? How can I relate to the go within instruction on some yoga videos? I think I know what you mean actually. I think some yoga instructors mean it, and I think what they mean is to bring your attention inwards. So that really means kind of like focusing on your own breath, focusing on your own bodily sensation, and kind of really focusing what's going on with yourself. So in a sense, I think kind of like shutting out whatever is around you and really trying to, again, be present, be with your bodily sensations, be with your breath. And I think that's usually what they mean with the, turning within yourself in these kind of videos.
Yeah, and based on the feedback, so we'll send a feedback doc. So based on the feedback, we can see whether or not we can organize other sessions with Dr. Berk.
Yeah, that sounds good.
Yeah.
And yeah, I agree with it feeling so abstract. I think sometimes, and that's probably within yoga, but also with mindfulness, the problem, anyone can call themselves a mindfulness or yoga instructor, and some people have really kind of like vague and abstract ideas, and they're not necessarily that good in communicating what they mean. I'm kind of the opposite. I'm a very practical person. So also in my instructions, I give very straightforward instructions, and I try not to do anything abstract. So I would suggest, if you have an instructor that is very abstract, perhaps you could also see there's a lot of online videos and find someone that resonates more with you. And the same goes for meditation, guided meditation. There are a lot of different types of audio out there, and there's a lot of free audio there, and it's often all called mindfulness, but not all is actually mindfulness. Some are kind of, a little more vague or yeah, not that straightforward. So you also have to kind of try to find and see what works for you, and sometimes even as silly as like what kind of voice you like. I at least I think I have a pretty normal speaking voice also in my guidance, but some people, when they guide, they really start speaking super slow, and they're trying to be very soothing, and yeah, that's not really up my alley, and I don't think it's necessary for meditation. Well, maybe you can record one.
Thanks, guys. Okay, all right. So
well, Carly actually got in the moment a few minutes ago.
oh, really?
When we got out of the session, you kind of sounded like you were in a different place.
I hope I didn't put you to bed.
Oh no.
Okay. All right. Well, we will be in touch. I guess we can log off now. So Dr. Berk, thanks again. I'll definitely be in touch for
great.
future seminars. So
sounds good.
Again.
All right. Have a wonderful day. Bye.
Okay, thanks. You too. Bye. Bye, everyone. Bye, everyone.